started, I'm just going to tell everybody you may or may not know, it's Human Trafficking Awareness Month in January, every January. And so we were kind of discussing about what we wanted to share this month to help people understand this issue better. And we wanted to talk about the demand for sex trafficking, because it's something that isn't talked about enough. And we kind of were saying, this is like the other side of trafficking, because so much is focused on victims and survivors, which is amazing. But not a lot of the discussion is regarding demand. And so that's why I wanted to have John on today. I first encountered John and his story it was like a year and a half ago, and Shared Hope International was doing their big yearly conference. Hundreds of thousands of us were all gathered together in the fight against human trafficking. And John was the keynote speaker at the very end of the conference, and just blew our whole team away with sharing just vulnerably, your story of how you were involved in trafficking and purchasing sex. And we were all floored. I mean, still to this day, we remember what you shared, and just your heart and what God's done to turn your life around. And so I thought it would be so cool to just chat with you. So thanks for joining.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. I really am. I appreciate the opportunity.
Good. Well, I know everyone kind of has everyone might be coming to this live tonight or this video with differing views and differing understandings of what trafficking looks like. And even like understanding what does it mean when we say the demand for sex trafficking. So John, I would love for you to just kind of share, maybe get everyone on a 101 of what when we talk about the demand for sex trafficking and sex buyers, what does that mean?
I think to me in particular, I think we'll get more into my story here in a little bit, but I think that there are a lot of people who view things in our society as normal. People view, going to strip clubs as normal. People view sometimes getting, paying for a prostitute. We're just spending money. They're getting money. I get what I need. And I think that one of the most important things that we can learn, and it was the most important thing that I learned after everything that I went through, I got the opportunity at Shared Hope to spend 3 days before I spoke, speaking with survivors, speaking with people who had been trafficked, and learning what I didn't know about trafficking. And I think when we look at trafficking, we've got to look at its actual definition is using force, fraud, or coercion to be able to force someone to do a commercial sex act. I mean, that's the basic definition. And I think that when we talk about 101 and we talk about buying and demand, trafficking as an industry is preying on the vulnerabilities of people that need help in some way, be it psychological, financial, emotional, whatever that is. And when we start talking about that, you have to get all the way back to the question of why. Why is this even a thing? Well, this is a thing. Trafficking exists because there are people who will pay for sex. And inside of what we're going to talk about tonight, I think that when we start talking about things like strip clubs or prostitution or, sugaring has been in the news, and Pornhub's been all over the news for showing, the rape of people that are actually being trafficked and they're being used. And so I think for us tonight, I really want to look at trafficking, and I want everybody that's here that's not working in human trafficking, take the movie Taken and pull it out of your mind. It's not what we're going to talk about tonight. When my story starts off, I lived in Plano, Texas, and I was working a job, making $120,000 a year as a normal employee, working in, a job. And so I just didn't realize, and this is where I think my story, and more importantly, I think where authenticity and vulnerability has to come out, is that we've got to start having these kinds of conversations about, okay, well, me as a normal person living in Plano, Texas, how am I viewed a buyer? How am I contributing to the demand side, even when I had no idea that I was driving trafficking? And so that's really, I think, where we want to start tonight.
No, that's good. That's good. And I know, when I heard your story, back when we first listened to you talk, we were were we in San Diego, Cincinnati, maybe Cincinnati,
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati,
No. Yeah,
and
I forget.
yeah, no, and here you are up on stage sharing this vulnerable story that I've never heard anyone else to my memory share on your side of things, and then you say, "Oh, I was arrested in Garland, Texas. I was living in Plano," and I was like, "What? He is from the Dallas Fort Worth area." And so, yeah, will you just, I guess, share kind of where this started for you, and kind of bring people into parts of your story, whatever you want to share.
Perfect. Well, I mean, I think you've got to start with everybody's story. When we all take our stories back, we start when we're a kid. I mean, we're shaped so much by how we grow up, the people that we're around, the messages that we get as children about ourselves really kind of shape us. And I always like to start by talking just a little bit about that in my childhood. My parents divorced when I was 6 years old, and it was not a pretty divorce. There was I was with mom for a little bit, then went back with dad, and it was just all kind of a mess. But I didn't grow up with physical abuse. I didn't grow up with sexual abuse. I grew up in a home with my parents working very hard to build, earn a living, raise me up to be a good child. So for me, what happened was the messages that came out from my childhood. My dad, who I have a wonderful relationship with now, I love him with my whole heart. But my dad was like most parents, I think. He wanted me to be better, or to be the best that I could possibly be. And so what he was doing when I was growing up, with all of the things that I did, at least the messages that I heard, were no matter what I did, it didn't seem to be quite good enough. And that didn't matter if it was folding clothes, doing chores, bringing home 7 A's and 1 B. The question would be, well, why did you get a B? If you'd studied harder, you could have got an A. And I'm going, fine. And what I learned is that, at least in my head, what I fed myself was, no matter what you do, you're going to fail. You're never going to be good enough. And that carries over into life. It carries, I mean, I got into, I went to college, got into sales. I did fairly well at sales, but the whole time, I mean, I won company trips. I did that kind of stuff. But in the back of my head, always, I was thinking, well, this isn't going to last long because I'm going to screw this up. Well, if you take that attitude and transition it to relationships, guess what I felt with every person that I dated? Well, either A, I'm going to screw this up and it's going to fall apart, or B, they're going to find out who I really am and they're going to leave me. So that kind of mentality was in my life.
Like so many of us can relate with. I think that's, I appreciate it. Makes me happy that you share that, because this is, so many of our stories of like wanting love and belonging, wanting to people to see your worth and things like that, and the imposter syndrome, like always thinking someone's going to find out the real you. So
Yep.
Real.
Oh, and well, I do. I think more people struggle with it than realize. And so for me, that plays out. That continues to play out. Like, I remember the first time I saw pornography. I remember the first time, I think I was 13 or 14. I can't remember the exact date, but I remember what it was, where it was. I remember what I saw. And it wasn't really a big thing for me in junior high school. I mean, it wasn't nearly as prevalent back in the 80s as it is today by any stretch, but it was still there if you wanted it. For me, my story, I move on into college. And once I get to college, I had a roommate, and we both went to church together, and we worked together. We worked at a company called Lunatic Fringe. The phone number was 1-800-LUNATIC, so we got some interesting calls on that. It was I'm crazy, man. We'll get some help. I answered the phone. It was such a fun thing. But I think what had happened was my roommate we lived together, and we went to this church together, and we got this, it wasn't 8.5 by 11, it was half of an 8.5 by 11, like a postcard in the mail, and it was a 1-800 number to call, like a phone sex line. And I was like, what is that? That's weird. And it was addressed to me. And I'm going, why is it addressed to me? That's weird.
Mm.
I mean, but the phone was in my name, so all that. Anyway, the next week, another one comes, and I'm like, okay, something weird's going on here. So I confronted my roommate, and I said, okay, dude, we're getting like phone sex things in the mail. What's the deal?
Mm.
Well, he opened up and said, I've had a problem with pornography most of my life, and it started when I was a kid. I'll talk to people at our church, and I'll talk to our pastor, and blah blah blah. Great, fantastic. I don't want anyone to crap. Well, fast forward another 6 months or so, I get a call at Lunatic Fringe, and it happens to be a sheriff's department in Arkansas, and that's where we live. That's where I'm from originally. And the sheriff's department's like, we need you to come in, and I'm like, why do you need me to come in? So it's this whole big thing. And so I was dating a prosecutor at the time. So I mean, I was doing illegal. I wasn't scared. I'm like, okay, what's the deal? So I show up at the sheriff's department, and he's like, have you ever had a ticket in Faulkner County? I went to UCA. I probably sped somewhere. Well, have you ever been a judge? So I don't know. I'm like, why am I here? He goes, we know that you called the court clerk of a circuit judge in Faulkner County on their teenage line. Because remember, for the people that are younger on this call, there used to be a thing called a phone book that you could look up someone's number in. But there used to be, teenagers would get their own lines. And so from my phone, someone had been calling teenage lines and talking sexually to teenagers, listed in my name. Well, it was like of course, it was the 80s, so it was like a montage. I saw all these things over the last 2 years that suddenly lined up, and I knew it was my roommate. Mm-hmm. Talked to him about it. He came out. He was honest. He said it was him. He told the story of his dad was either an attorney or a doctor. I can't remember, but he had a nanny from the time he was like 7 or 8. And his dad would go off to work, leave him with the nanny. And the nanny basically didn't pay attention to him. He found his dad's porn collection. And from the time he was 7 on, he watched porn for hours a day. Mm-hmm. So he gets to adulthood, and now he's doing this stuff that he can't control, this addiction. He shared with everybody, did what he needed to do with the courts, took care of everything. And then we had taken a trip to Las Vegas for work. And when he came back a day early, and my best friend called me, who was the youth pastor at church, he's like, you need to come by my house before you go home. Anyway, he had taken off. He had gotten back. His plane landed at 9 o'clock in Little Rock. Somehow he rented a U-Haul, drove it back an hour home, and from 10:30 until about 2 o'clock in the morning, he was on the phone because we got the phone records in. So we were just curious, again, I knew a lot of prosecutors at the time. My buddy was also one. He said, let's see if they call any teenage numbers, and maybe we can talk to the parents, blah, blah, blah. We start going through it. There's 800 numbers, 900 numbers. And again, at this point, I'm dating a prosecutor. I'm working. I'm getting closer to marriage. There's just things that are moving in my life. Mm-hmm. Well, as it turned out, we called one of those 800 numbers to see what kinds of numbers he was calling. And I remember calling that day, and there was something that when I heard the voice on the other end of the line talking sexually, something just triggered in me. I was like, oh, I like that. I mean, and I didn't think anything about it at the time. But what I found is that I would go for a month and a half, and then I would be on the way home, and I'd be frustrated or stressed out about something. I'd be like, why don't I just call that number? Mm-hmm. And I would listen, never listen, never paid for it, just listen. But that started a 10-year journey, so to speak, into my addiction. The once a month became once every couple of weeks, which became every week. Then when I was traveling, I would be gone from home for a couple of weeks, 2 or 3, usually 2.5 weeks a month, I'd be traveling. I learned there's pornography on the box in my hotel room I could watch. Then I'd start purchasing pornography because at this point I had gotten married. My marriage was struggling. I mean, it was legitimate. Like everybody in a marriage, we struggled, but we had, sexual struggles clearly because of what was going on with me. I had super unrealistic expectations, and we just struggled with that. So for me, going all the way back, I'm a guy that knows I'm going to fail, feels like I'm going to fail every time, feels like if I'm going to get exposed, I'm going to fail and I'm going to lose my marriage. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose all this stuff. And the only thing that I found that allowed me an outlet for that, some people go to healthy things like meditation, prayer, counseling. Some people go to alcohol. I turned to sex. And it led to strip clubs. It led to, prostitution. It led to massage parlors. Because for me, instead of manning up and dealing with this, I chose to stay hidden. And I chose to stay hidden because of the very core of who I was. I believe that if people found out about all the stuff that I've been doing, I knew it was wrong. It wasn't, paying for a prostitute when you're married. You can pull religion or God completely out of it. That's just not a healthy thing. So inside of all of this, I didn't realize until several years later that my buying habits were, I started off with people, in their 30s, and then it was 28, and then it was 25, and then it was 23. And when you're in an addiction, you don't know it. When you're in an addiction, you don't realize how bad it is. And so that ends up being down to 18, right? Now, all of this stuff has come around at this point where, as we know from people like Fight the New Drug and all the research, once you start seeking things that are going to trigger you to be able to get that response, it rewires your brain. And when your brain pathways and neural pathways get rewired, you need more stimulation in order to be able to continue to get the same high you did. So for me, the younger was part of it.
Gotcha.
The other part of it is one that I started off saying we've normalized a lot of things in society. I think that by watching the amount of porn I was watching at that time, combined with the sex addiction, combined with my insecurities and my desire to be loved, I felt loved for a brief period of time, and then when it was over, it was empty. And the best analogy, I heard it recently, a guy said, "Sounds like you were watching a cooking show." I went, "What?" He said, "Sounds like you're watching a cooking show, because you look at it and you go, man, that looks good." And you're like, that would taste really good. And then when the show's over, you're like, you're still hungry, right? And I found that to be true.
Analogy.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
I'm stealing that right now. So, but it's true, because it looks good, and it's good for a little bit when you're thinking about it and getting excited about it in your head. But then the reality is now you're empty and you're still hungry at the end. So for me, I had gone into, your porn use has changed. There's the first thing you see is a naked woman. You're like, ooh, that's amazing. And then you see a man and a woman. Ooh, that's amazing. Right? It progresses, and you start looking at different things. The height of my addiction, I was looking at, now again, all the time that we're doing this, my wife and I have now moved to Dallas. We've moved to Dallas, and she's working as an attorney at a law firm downtown. I'm working selling marching band uniforms to high schools and colleges, which, it's random. I was a band geek, but it happens. And, my addiction's going on. No one knows. I've told nobody. Why? Because if I tell people, they won't love me anymore. They won't appreciate me. I won't have friends. I'll lose everything. That's what I felt. So for me, it all came crashing down when I went to Garland, Texas. I had gone into a teen chat room. His chat rooms were a thing, early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went in there, I went for the purpose of finding someone that was a teenager. That's what I went for. Again, by the way, I'm not proud of any of this, but it needs to be told. When I showed up to meet this person, I was surrounded by 3 cop cars, arrested for criminal solicitation of a minor, and went through, at that point, it's out there. There's nothing you can do to hide it. And so I was just very broken at that point. And so I say all that, and the reason that I always tell that is because people think that, by the way, that was the first time I went after someone underage, and I was very grateful I got arrested. It actually was a rescue for me in a lot of ways, because there's no reason for me to think, based on my activities and my trends and all the normalization I had done, there's no reason to think that I wouldn't have tried to go after a kid. There's just not. It would have continued on.
Mm.
So I tell this because I don't, this, the sex addiction part is not, everybody doesn't have that. But I mean, I heard a statistic last, somebody said the statistics are 80% of men look at porn. I said, yes. And the other statistic is 20% lie. So I think that that has become such an influencer on our country and on our world. I mean, look at all the things that are happening with Pornhub. Look at all that stuff. And behind all of the views, behind all of that stuff, are people like me who had a regular job, a great wife. Again, our marriage wasn't great. She's a great woman. I still, to this day, I'm friends with her. You know, there's all this going on, and people think that sex offenders are monsters. They're not born that way. You don't become that. You're not born going after someone that's underage. There are always factors. And inside of that, by the way, someone just said there are men that don't look at porn. I do know that. I'm kind of being ridiculous when I say that. A lot of men do, and I think a lot of women do too. That's been a trend the last few years as well. But all of that to say, what I was looking for was a healthy relationship. What I was looking for was a relationship with vulnerability and authenticity that couldn't exist without me being honest about all of me. Not just the good parts, but the bad parts. Not just the positive, but the things that I struggle with. And I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't know that what I was doing was the very thing that was keeping me from having that kind of lifestyle that I wanted. So the picture I'm trying to paint right now is that I was a normal guy. I was just normal. And I think this is where, when you start looking at, you know, Garland, you start looking at Dallas, you start looking at the DFW area, and people want to say this doesn't happen here. It's happening all the time there. I know because I was there.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say, you know, we were trying to kind of create imagery for this to help people understand where, if, because you're saying this is everywhere, you know, this is in our neighborhoods, this is in our communities, this isn't just the creepy guy in a white van. To think about people who maybe even have money to pay for sex, but if, for us, you know, we work on the victim side of things, on the aftermath, and if you care about victims who are recovered, victims who need recovery, then for every victim that is recovered who we serve, let's talk about how many sex buyers are represented for that victim, you know. And there's lots of stats on how many Johns a victim may serve in a day, but the numbers are astounding. We don't have great stats, but I think that's important for people to know, because this isn't just kind of a once here, once there. It's happening a lot. And if we served, you know, if there was 81 recoveries last year, at least in the Dallas area, that we responded to, how many Johns and sex buyers, I don't like to use the word John, sex buyers were, you're welcome.
I'm working on that.
how many sex buyers were represented in that? Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
It's a lot. And, you know, I think there's a group out there in Washington, D.C. called Demand Abolition. And Demand Abolition did a report back in 2018 where they interviewed 8,200 people, 8,200 men. And what they interviewed these men about were about their buying habits. And what was interesting about this swath of people, and by the way, you can get that report online. I forget what it's called, but it's the 2018 report. What I found fascinating was they categorized men as never bought, bought once, frequent buyer, which is someone that buys, you know, several times a year, and high frequency buyer, people who buy multiple times a month. Now, again, that's 8,200 men, so it's a small sampling, but it's still a lot of people. Here's what they found, and this is a statistic that I think is absolutely fascinating. When they pulled all of these people, again, so there's 100% of them represented. The high frequency buyers represented 25%. Okay, so that is the ones that they're buying multiple times. What was fascinating to me was, based on the numbers and all of the responses, the high frequency buyers represented 75% of the buying. Now, I know it's staggering. Now, what does that mean? Yes, buyers are across all socioeconomic levels. Yes, buyers are across every race, gender. They're all there. However, you got some things that are there. People with disposable incomes are the ones that are paying for sex for the most part. That's one of the things that I've really talked about recently is yes, they're everywhere. And like you're talking about, the number of buyers out there are tremendous. I mean, you're talking about girls and guys that are servicing, you know, I don't even know the numbers, but I know it's multiple 6, 7, 10 people a day.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a lot.
Well, and just to kind of like just to make sure everyone's on the same page with what we're talking about when we say buyer. So, just a mini example. Let's say I'm working with a 15-year-old girl who was just recovered. Let's say she's over in North Dallas, and her pimp it has a hotel room for her, so she's over at the Courtyard by Marriott hotel room, and she's got to make $800 tonight. And so she's going to maybe have some ads online, you have these chat rooms, have an Instagram account, whatever it is, to solicit some buyers who will come have sex with her in exchange for money. And that's what we're talking about when we say buyer. I just want to make sure, like, people are like, are they buying children and they're taking them somewhere? No, they're buying. And so that's what we talk about when we're saying the demand for sex is the sex buyers who are kind of having a one-time encounter, or who are regulars. Our girls call them regulars a lot. And so let's say that same 15-year-old girl services, I don't know, let's just say 50 men in a week. Maybe, well, I don't know how to crunch the numbers, so I'm not good at math, but maybe 15 of those 50 purchase a lot. So they're regulars, they're coming in 3 times a week, or, whatever it means. That's what we mean when we say high frequency buyer or regulars. So I just want to give everyone some examples that might look like.
No, it's excellent. And, for people that don't know, there are tons of websites out there that you can go. There's websites that will review escorts. There are websites that you can go and find 800,000 reviews on people. You can find up to 1 million reviews, and it's like, I don't know, a Google rating for a restaurant. This server was terrible, blah, blah, blah. This server was great. Go ask for them. And if you've never seen anything like that and you don't work in this world, you'd be horrified at what you see.
Yeah.
You'd be horrified to find out. I mean, it gets specific on sexual acts, the way they do it, their attitude. I mean, it is unbelievable. And so, and it doesn't have to be all that. There's also online ads that you can find online. Craigslist was always a big one. Backpage, until they got shut down.
Yeah.
I mean, were big ones. And
there's both sides of it. It's for the girls or boys or whoever who's kind of sometimes called the providers, the victims sometimes, and for the Johns, it's the same. I call it like Yelp for the one side, and there's Yelp for the other.
Yep.
The whole world that most people hopefully don't know about, but
right.
It's real, and we want you to know about. So tell us, like, when you got arrested, I mean, what was that, your rock bottom, or how are you where you are now? What has been some of the key points?
Well, I mean, when I got arrested, clearly my stuff was all in an online chat. There was no denying it. I tried. I lied to everybody. And again, this goes back to I didn't want to be exposed. I want myself protected. Lied to everybody. Put off the court trial. I hit bottom. I had to talk to my wife, but I told her that I cheated and they lied in the chat and said they were really overage when they weren't. Again, I'm doing all that stuff to manage the fallout. But ultimately, when I went to court, I got found guilty, and I got sentenced to 90 days in Dallas County Jail, which I don't recommend. The food is terrible there. By the way, it is terrible there. But I spent 90 days in Dallas County. I ended up being on 10 years of probation. A couple of things happened during probation that made a difference. One of the things that Texas does incredibly well, I'll speak to Dallas. I don't know about the whole state, but I know that in Dallas, if you are required to register as a sex offender, especially if you're on probation, you attend a group every single week that you have to pay for, and you have group counseling or group therapy with other sex offenders. And inside of all of that, what Dallas and I think the state of Texas is trying to do is they're trying to bring about true societal change. Because, I mean, we've talked about this before, Lindsay, is if you take a lot of states and a lot of places will arrest someone and they'll say, okay, you've got to go to a 2-day buyer school. You've got to go to this school and you go. And then if they ever do anything even remotely wrong, oh, look, they didn't follow through with anything. They had 2 days of training. And I'm going, when I started this off, I talked about stuff that happened to me in the 70s, right? It's, you don't take, well, you worked with 200 plus people. Do you take them out and put them through a 1-day school that suddenly that switch flips and they're out and they're not going to go back and they're not going to struggle with going back? No. Right. And so I think that is one of the things that, again, I'll just say it about Dallas. Sandy Potter was my treatment provider. She is amazing. I still see her to this day. I've been on probation for almost 5 years now, but Sandy's still I still see her today. She's wonderful, but they work on things with sex offenders like, we start with telling your offense report. This is what I did. And you have to type it out and take a polygraph on it. Then you go through and do your entire sexual history, everything you've ever done with anybody. And then you take a polygraph on whether or not you're honest. So you got to learn what they're trying to get you to do. A, is they're trying to find out how deep the well goes. Mm-hmm. But I also know they're trying to learn, can you get authentic? Can you get, because the hiding and the secrets are the things that stimulate and keep this going. If I had been exposed the first time that I went to a prostitute or chose to buy a prostituted woman, if I had been exposed that day, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. Mm. I'd have gotten the help. I'd have gotten what I needed because I had friends around me that would have helped me. Mm. So that group did wonders for me. The other things they work on are things like thinking errors. You know, Sandy said, you know, we're going to work on thinking errors. I'm going, what the heck's a thinking error? Well, thinking error are things like, you know, lying by omission, thinking things like, and things that everyone does, redirecting. You know, what happened to you when you got arrested? Oh, well, you know, these cops did something that was bad, but did you hear about this thing? Right? It's always redirecting. It's always that stuff. So you learn practical skills. So that helped me tremendously, having that group. And the other thing you had to do is you always had to be, if you screwed up on probation, which, by the way, most people do, you got in some serious trouble and you could get violated and go back to jail. But what's great about it is I had somebody that was on the pulse of my life every week and hearing my stories and my progress every week. And then you had a probation officer that saw me once a month for 20 minutes. They didn't really know. So the way Texas does it gives people a legitimate shot at changing and why is it important to change? It's important to change because, you know, that you free people, right? That's one of your big things. And I think people that are still captive force other people to be captive too, through their families, through their relationships. They're going to pick a woman that they can control and manipulate. They're going to train their kids to control and manipulate a woman, which passes it to the next generation. And I go, if you can get somebody to get healed and find out what was the root cause of this and be able to put it out there, and that's why I speak, I got to put it out there, we can start to see societal change instead of just shoving somebody into a corner, putting them on a list and feeling good about life.
Yes.
So
good.
Sorry, I get all fired up sometimes.
No, I'm like, say it again.
So, well, the other thing and the real thing that impacted me even more so than my group was my best friend's Daryl Amy. He has been my best friend for a lot of years. Matter of fact, when I told him I had been arrested before court, I told him at 9 a.m. and he lived 5 hours away. At 2:30 p.m., we were sitting in Stadium Cafe having a beer and having a conversation. He drove all the way over. What in the world? What's going on? Well, he went to, there's an author named John Eldridge. He runs Ransomed Heart Ministries, and he wrote a book called Wild at Heart. And Daryl hired me to work for him because it's hard to find a job as a felon, right? It feeds the isolation and all the issues, but my choice, I did that. But he'd given me a job, and he went to, I was done with God. I was angry with God. I didn't care. You know, God didn't do anything for me. Look at where I'm at now. And so Daryl he finally got into Wild at Heart, and he called me on a Sunday. We didn't usually talk on the weekends because we talked all through the week. Well, I said, hey, I knew he'd gotten in Wild at Heart. I said, how was Wild at Heart? Pulley, it was great. It was so amazing. And Daryl's a little excitable anyway, but he's like, it was amazing. And I thought I was going to have to wait. This was in October. I was going to wait till March to bring you back here, but I met these guys in the airport, and they're doing one in Texas in 3 weeks, and you got to go. And I'm going, no, I'm not going. I said, tell me about it.
This after you were still on probation, or okay.
Yep, I was still on probation for the sex offense, yeah. So I'm like, let me get this straight. A bunch of Christian men in the woods for 4 days? No, I'm out, not doing it. And he's like, well, I'm like, he's like, yeah, you got to go. I'm like, well, I can't afford to take off. I work for you. I hadn't sold enough. And he said, well, you know, it's my company. Those are now company holidays. You can't work those days anyways. I'm like, crap. So whatever. So when is it? And I said, how much is it? He said, oh, it's only $299. I'm like, again, see Exhibit A. Haven't sold, can't afford it. Oh, I'm paying for it. I'm like, oh, it would throw me nuts. Next thing I know, I'm at this event with him and 6 other guys. And this is not necessarily about the event. However, I showed up, and for 3 weeks leading up to this event, I had one prayer. I said, God, I don't know where the hell you've been in my life for the last 15 years, but I better hear from you or I'm done. I mean, I'm just done. I don't want this anymore. I'm tired of thinking about you. And looking back, I'm certain that the God of the universe was intimidated by my prayer. So he did answer me. But what happened at this event was we started hearing these messages about how men pose. And we put out this image of this is who we are. Look at this. Because we underneath it think we're not good enough or not enough. So we try to put out an image. And as we started peeling back layers of that thing, we all decided to build a fire one night. It was like the second night we were there. And it was Daryl and it was 7 other guys. Daryl, me, and 6 other guys. Daryl had paid for all of us to go. Daryl spent $1,800 getting us all. Is that right? Is that math right? 300 times 8, $2,400 getting us all there. And we sat around the fire that night, and I thought, this is literally what I thought. I thought, well, what the hell? If we're going to do this, let's do it. For the first time in my life, with those guys, I opened up and I told my whole unadulterated story. I didn't hide anything. I didn't pretend. I didn't act like I didn't do things. I didn't try to pretend I've got it all together. I did that. And I mean, I told him about my sex offense, told him about all that stuff, because Daryl knew about it, but the other guys didn't. Mm-hmm. Well, the next guy that went after me, and so he told his whole story, and his story was about being abused as a kid. And I'm going, oh, that guy's going to hate me, right? And what happened was we stayed out there until a little after 2 a.m. And all 8 of us told our stories. We told who we are, why we are who we are. And what we decided, let's give this a shot. Let's see if we can walk life together and if we can walk life authentically. The first year we had a message board online that we messaged back and forth throughout the day of what we were doing. I mean, we had over 400 pages of stuff from that. That started that we met every week on Sunday night. And that, as of October of last year, that's been 11 years that we've done that.
Wow.
Yeah. And this works in romantic relationships as well. There's something about knowing someone and being known that lets you pull off the image and go, hey, this is me. But what's amazing about that level of authenticity is it allows you to start to understand in your heart that you're loved as you are, not as you're supposed to be, because none of us are what we're supposed to be ever. There's always weaknesses in all of us. It's that love that can set you free to be able to stand in front of an audience of people and go, this is what I did. It's horrible. I don't like it. It's terrible. But I know that if everyone came at me with pitchforks and torches, I'm good. I'm loved. And what we've learned from the group of guys, and this is what changed me, was this group of guys has learned how to walk things out. And do we follow Jesus? Yes, we do. I know that's not what we're here to talk about necessarily. However, we're authentic and we're real about it. And in other words, everyone sit down. When I look at porn today, and I know everybody's going, what? I haven't kicked that yet. It's not gone from my addictions yet. It's not, I don't do it every day, every week. It's not that, but it hasn't been gone. when I do, it's not hidden anymore. I go to my men and I go, guys, brothers, this is my thing. I did this week. And you know what they ask me? They don't go, did you pray 7 times today? Did you read your Bible today? Have you repented? They go, Pulley, what's going on in your heart? Are you lonely just because you moved to Wisconsin from Dallas recently? Are you struggling financially? What's going on in your heart that you're going to something that you know almost killed you and almost put you in jail for years and maybe decades? What's going on that you would go back to that? And so what we're trying to do is get all the way back. Remember where I started? Go all the way back to the root,
Yeah.
and figure out what's driving you so that you can figure out how to change it. And so that's been the thing that has transformed my life more than anything else. I mean, we did go to that thing in Texas, and we actually started an organization called Man Alive Expedition, which you mentioned in my bio, that we do Wild at Heart boot camps. I think we've done, I think it's 16 at this time. We've had a little bit over 800 guys go through it. We're trying to get men to be authentic and real so that we can start to have some of these kind of conversations in a way that will change our society, and that will change not just us and our families, but generations to come. So,
Man, that is so powerful. And I mean, what you said was basically love and belonging. It was connection. It was authentic connection that, has been the building blocks or the foundation blocks to bring you to where you are today. Which I just have to say, you really are one of the most brave people I've ever met. Because what we can all relate to is that every person has a shadow. Every person has things that we prefer to be in the dark, and not everyone knows about them. And this is part of your shadow that you're willing to share with the world right now. And it's just super inspiring. I think it's a message for us all. But I would love to get into some questions because I know we have a few Q&As, and we can ramble on about all the other things. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat here on our live. But someone asked us earlier, they sent in a question. They said, how do you, and you may have answered this, so I can't remember exactly which part this fits in, but how do you handle the guilt and shame?
Well, you have to learn that it's gone. And again, I go all the way back to, I'm a little different than many religious Christians are. I cuss, I drink a little beer, but Jesus still loves me. I think you got to come to the point with the guilt and the condemnation. You have to recognize that it's strictly another message that's designed to keep you from being free. Because if I sit and worry about every time I screw up, I've said this for years, and I think this is true. What we focus on absolutely determines what we see.
So good.
What we focus on absolutely determines what we see. And what I focus on is that I am a low-life person that screws up, and look, the messages that you get in your head, look, you looked at porn again. See, you haven't changed at all. You're the same person you were 20 years ago. And I have to go, no, that's just not true. I am a broken person because I'm a human being. We all are. But you've got to, for me, the way I do it is because I understand that I'm a child of the living God. And I understand that what I have done has been covered and taken care of, not because of me, not because I've been amazing and wonderful and tremendous, but because God loves me that much.
Yeah.
And the guilt and condemnation, I had to figure that part out. And the only way I know to do it is just to surrender it and to ask God what's true about me. Because if I'm created in God's image, then I'm not a horrible, stupid, moronic idiot that continually does bad things. I'm not. And I think you say I'm brave. I'm going to say, yes, I am. However, it's not altruistic. There is still a part of even doing this kind of conversation that's freeing for me. It allows me to continually go, I'm still broken. I'm still a work in progress, but it allows me to know I'm having an impact. But I guess what you focus on is just going to absolutely determine what you see. And so if you focus on guilt and condemnation, you're going to stay there. And that's true for anybody, not just sex offenders or, addicts. It's true for everybody.
So good. So good. The second part of that question was, well, it's a separate question. It's two questions from the same person. What's your approach to, well, when you share with survivors, what's your approach to kind of connecting with survivors, and what's that, I guess, experience been like? Their question was, how's your approach? But I'm just elaborating.
My approach is to be authentic. People who are survivors have been manipulated their entire lives, and they've learned to manipulate to survive, right? I mean, there's all of that. There's all those things in there. To me, I find that survivors that I've interacted with on a personal basis, one-to-one, they tell me that they receive healing by me telling my story authentically, which still blows my mind a little bit. I think that people who are victims deserve to get some kind of answer for why what happened to them happened to them. The response that I've gotten from a lot of victims to me personally is a lot of what you felt as a kid that controlled you is the same things that control me. And there is a grace and an understanding that comes from many survivors towards me because of that. And I think that the insecurities, all of that stuff drove me to stand up and be aggressive and become a perpetrator, and drove them to become a victim because they didn't know any different. I could have just as easily been on the other side of the coin. Sure. So how has the response been if they don't know me one-to-one? Very interesting. At the Shared Hope Conference, when I spoke with Marion Hatcher, who actually leads the National Johns Initiative that's, arrested 10,000 guys like me that were buyers online, she and I presented together because she's a survivor herself, and we're good friends. But when we spoke, there was a group of survivors that was upset, very, very upset that I was on stage. And I think that my approach has got to be with humility. It's got to be that I understand that there's a level, everybody's at a different level of healing and in the process. And depending on where people are at with that level, we can have different conversations. I had one conversation with a survivor who was mad that I was speaking. And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I don't know what else to do except what I'm supposed to do. And I'm supposed to do this. And there was another one that I sat and talked with. And I'd met her a year ago. And with her, I sat down and I said, okay, are people upset because of this, or do they just want their pound of flesh from a buyer? Again, I'm humble, and you got to know your relationships with people. I know I represent, to women who have been abused, I represent a couple of different things, but one of which is I represent the people that abuse them. And even though I was never violent, I was kind, because even in the middle of all that craziness, I was looking for love. And so that wasn't me, but you just hear buyer and that gets associated. And so I have to understand that when I'm speaking to someone, that may be what they're doing. And no matter how they respond to me, I just have to continue to love on them because I don't know where they are in their journey. And I think I don't hide my past. We're very particular at Fierce Freedom, where I work now. I work in demand reduction. We're very particular. When someone's working with a survivor or someone that's coming out, I'm not the one that's working with them. That's not my role. However, I have, again, through the course of things in the last couple of years, been around some of the people that have come out, and I've been honest with them. And my job as a man is I want to show them that not all men are looking at them as an object to be used. I look at them as a human being to be loved, no matter where they are. And when I look at a survivor, my posture is right in the eyes. I am never looking below right here, and I'm listening to what they're saying. I'm trying to interact with them in a way that they're given value and they're given respect, no matter where they are, whether they're still in the life or they're out. They need value and respect, because it's what we all need.
Yeah, and hopefully it's redeeming, for a lot of them. Yeah, I love that. Here's another question for you. Are there resources for offending predators or unoffending predators, or is there only help after you've attempted to offend? So I guess those who haven't been caught yet, That's a very interesting question. Those who haven't been caught yet, which let's talk percentage of who I mean, it's there's not a huge percentage that have been caught. Don't let me go
Right.
off that.
Right.
But for those who haven't and could be connected to this, or someone wants to send resources, I mean, what's out there other than getting arrested?
I'm going to say a couple of things on this. I'm going to speak to men. I'm going to speak to women in the movement for a second too. But with the men and men that are involved in this, or men that are involved in purchasing, you got to know a couple of things. Number one, this is a whole lot deeper issue than today. It goes way back. You've got a brokenness in you that you haven't admitted yet because it's not healed. And if you want help for that, yes, there are. You need to find some trained professionals that you can talk to. If you're in the depths of pornography and you're going and buying sex, or if you're just going and buying sex, it doesn't matter. You've got to find some place where you can work out authentically what to do. And somebody just said Fight the New Drug is a good resource. Fight the New Drug is an exceptional resource for understanding the addiction of pornography and the harms of pornography. If you're involved in buying habits, and that's something you need to do. I tell everybody this, you have got to find someone that you trust enough that you can be authentic with. You've got to find it. You've got to find people. There needs to be a person or persons, and it's not just anybody. And just because somebody has a title doesn't mean you trust them. Just because someone is a pastor of a church doesn't mean that, they're going to know everything how to do. Find someone you trust that you can open up and be authentic with. Tell your story. Tell who you are, tell what you're going through, and then you're probably going to need to get some counseling help. I was blessed in the state of Texas to have 10 years of cognitive behavioral treatment through group therapy. Not everybody gets that. You've got to find a way. You got to get to the root to be able to get out. That's where you've got to figure that out. So I would say this too, and I do want to say this. Please don't shoot me. I think that one of the problems is we don't have a lot of men working in this movement. It has been a female-led movement, period, end of story. And kudos to the women that have been on the front lines fighting this, fighting for victims and survivors and doing that. I think when I started doing this a couple of years ago, and I know that I've talked to people that have been in this a long time, and they said that it started to change. Men in general are the buyers. Men in general are the purchasers. We can even get specific white men that are upper middle class. We can get very specific about that if we want to.
Yeah.
Men have been considered the enemy by the movement for so long. And somebody asked me, they said that they had a friend that was a guy that wanted to get involved, and they sent him to 3 different conferences. And when the guy came back from the 3 conferences, he didn't know much about trafficking. But his friend asked him, well, what did you think? And his statement was, if you want to invite men to dinner, you've got to take them off the menu. And so what I want to say to the people that are here that are fighting this is what men don't need is more conversation around how bad they are. They don't need more conversation about how they all objectify women. They don't need more. Does that happen? Yes. Is it wrong? Yes. Men are not inspired to change by telling them what they already know they do wrong. They're inspired by painting a picture of who they are. When I talk to a group of men, say at a church or an organization, I paint a picture. Don't you want to be men that fight for your daughters? Don't you want to be men that builds a world that will protect the victimless? Are the victims in this world that are being abused because of their vulnerabilities? Don't you want to make sure that in your life you're doing the things that you need to do to step up as a man and say, I'm not going to do that? And so I say all of that to say, if we could find a way to pull the words toxic masculinity out of our message, if we could find a way to speak to men and inspire them to become more of what they desire to be, none of us are where we need to be. But I understand we're the problem. I'm just saying to the people that are in this, I think that would be helpful if we could do that, because I know we need more men in this, because we need more people to fight it, because the men are driving this stuff.
Yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a good message just about what is our messaging and how are men invited into this into this field. It's tough
It
because
is.
well, I mean, because I think one of the things, and Rachel, you can give me some other questions. I know there's some questions coming in on the chat, but I people I want people to know kind of what's being done. And these next several weeks, I'm going to talk it through some with some different people about some of the things that are being done. But um, there are arrests happening, and that's great. McLennan County. I'll talk to Joe Saramuki at the end of the month, hopefully. McLennan County arrests a lot of Johns, and you heard John's story today about how, like, that was a tipping point potentially, in your story. But we know that the arrests are not the answer. It is part of it. We know that sometimes the risk versus reward, there needs to be more risk involved with doing this, but it's our community. It's us coming around each other and seeing each other as authentic, vulnerable humans, worthy of love and belonging. Like, that is going to be the answer long term. But that's obviously very pie in the sky, very hard to kind of figure out what does that mean, Lindsay. And so, what do you think? Like, how can we advance the demand side? Fighting the demand side of things, because again, like I told everyone at the beginning, we feel called to Traffic 911 to be on the empowerment side, which is unfortunately more of the reactive side, because we want to help a lot of these young girls who've been recovered and be on their journey to healing. However, if we don't go to the top of the river, whatever that saying is, and start affecting change from the top down, what we're going to be spinning our wheels for decades to come. And so, what does it look like to create change in this field on the demand side? Big question. I'm just curious what things that you've seen or what you would like to see.
Well, I'm going to say this. I'm never running for political office because of what I'm about to say. This goes all the way up. And you can't legislate morality and you can't legislate attitudes. I understand that. But we do need some legislation in our country that will be effective. I don't think that there need to be, even knowing what I've been through, 10 years probation, still registered to this day for 5 more years. I still have to deal with consequences of what I did 15 years ago. Again, my choice, my consequences. I don't think we need to lessen sentencing. I don't think we need to stop arresting people, because I do believe that justice is a part of it. If we stop with justice, if we have justice without mercy, we're not going to be able to change anything. We're just going to throw people into a corner and into a cell, and they're going to be stuck there. I think that for many places, they need to add a component like Texas has. They need to not just say, we're going to do justice and throw them in jail or put them on probation and don't screw up or you're going back to jail. We need to find a way to add a component that digs into the issues that are driving that level of behavior. Because if you get all the way back, and if you can help, look, okay, if 75% of purchases happen from 25% of men, if you can get those 25%, you can pull a chunk out of this, right? So let's take that and go, okay, how do we know we're going to get this 25% of men? They're the ones that are the frequent buyers. They're on your sex offenders list. They're on the registry. We got them. How can we take them and give them tools? Again, they don't deserve tools. They need to be thrown away. But no, they don't. They're human beings. They need tools to be able to change. Because I wasn't an evil predator that sat around waiting to figure out how I could devour a 15-year-old. I was a human being that grew up with some insecurities that fed me in life that did that. Everybody's got a story. So the component of having groups and having treatment providers that work with these offenders regularly with a plan to get their thinking and mentality changed over a course of years is how we start this snowball effect the other way. Yeah. And so I think that's key. I think the other thing that's absolute key it's not an easy question or an easy answer. Men and women have to get authentic and vulnerable. We have to get to the point where we can say, I struggle with pornography. I struggle with buying. I purchased someone last week, yesterday, and not have people go, oh my God, you're such a terrible person. No, you're a broken person like everybody else. And so how do we go? Again, it's all about getting back to the root of the problem and getting back to how we can create change back there, because the guilt condemnation messages, the messages from our childhood that we feed ourselves and all that stuff, holds us back from becoming free. So if you just put somebody in jail for a little while and throw them on probation, we're stuck. They're going to be the same. They're not going to change. They have no motivation to change. There's no vision cast for who they can be different. They're just stuck as a criminal. And I think that's one of the main things is we've got to have groups of people that pop up that are authentic and real. And we've got to have, if we really want to deal with this stuff, we're going to have to figure out how to apply legislation to the people who are in power as well as the people who are not. Again, not running for office. So.
Yeah. I wish I would, but no. I had a couple questions, but I just saw one come up that I was going to ask anyway, so I'll ask that one maybe first. But recommendations on teens and pornography, and I hope people have heard where your story began, because man, we could talk a whole nother hour, and I know we're already past 8 o'clock, but I don't really care if you don't care, so
I'm good.
A little bit longer, because there's some good questions, but we know, I mean, many of you maybe have seen some of the stats out there on what the average age of first looking at pornography is, and I've seen stats as young as 8 years old, and so we know that is such a hold and can become such an addiction that snowball effects into what we're talking about today. And so what words do you have to share with maybe some people who are on here who have teenagers or young people who are in front of screens more in the last year than they probably ever have been in their lives? What do we do? What do we recommend for people with teenagers and anyone, with that porn addiction and yeah.
Full disclosure, no children. So I'm just going to say that before I say anything about how to deal with teenagers. I like teenagers because you can talk directly to them. You can say things directly because I think for parents, I would say this from what I've seen and watched of parents who do a job in getting their kids to communicate well with them. Be direct, be honest, and have the conversations you're uncomfortable having. Have a conversation with your kid about sexting. Have a conversation with your kid about sugaring and what that really means and what that really turns into. It's not you're going out with some old dude for dinner. He wants to sleep with you and get you. He wants to find what your vulnerability is and attack you. For parents of all kinds, I talk to men most of the time. I tell all my fathers the best thing you can do to protect your children from being trafficked and from all of that is your daughter needs to know that she is the apple of your eye and that you love her no matter what she does ever. No matter what she does, you need to love her and she needs to know she can always come to you. I think at the end of the day, it boils down to you've got a group of people that are becoming adults and they're moving into adulthood. So they're trying to spread their wings. They don't know how the music gets louder. The boys start driving crazier. I mean, there's this transition period that they're trying to feel their way through. And parents are trying to go, not yet, right? There's just this whole thing that's going on. I just feel like at the end of the day, the thing that kids want is they want what you said you want and I want. They want to know that they're loved for who they are, and no matter what they do, they can come back to you. I'm not talking about not having consequences for choices or not punishing your kids. I'm just talking about at the end of the day, they need to know that you're about more than just discipline. They need to understand that you're about their heart and that you want their lives to be good. I'll give you a simple example. There was a 15-year-old boy that was, talking about how, I look at porn some, my mom's mad, but I don't know, why. I don't know why. I'm not addicted to porn. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? And we went through some steps with that. But the thing that I said to him that I think was important was I said, okay, look, let's be honest. You're 15 and you have to do things the way your parents are telling you to do now. And they're telling you not to look at porn. Here's my question. Do you like what happens when you look at porn? Do you like how you feel at the end of looking at it when it's over, or do you still feel empty? And I said, my question to you is, in 3 years, you're going to be out on your own. What do you want? Your parents are telling you to do something, and yeah, you probably should do that, but at the end of the day, you're 15. You're going to be making your own decisions in 3 years. Why not start now? If this is empty and it doesn't get you, if it's not helping your relationship with your parents, if it's not helping your relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend, if you have one, well, you got to decide. This is for you because you're going to be an adult soon. And I think there's a balance of being a parent and this is what you do. Here's a line. And they need to be able to make their own choices. And so, again, as a non-parent, These are my thoughts.
No, that's real. That's real. Well, you mentioned a word that someone else asked real quick. What would you say to a young girl who wants to get involved in sugaring or seeking arrangements? Is for anyone who doesn't know what you mean when you say sugaring?
Yeah, well, sugaring is, I mean, there are websites out there. Seeking arrangements is one of them. There's another website. I mean, they're sugardaddy.com, I think, is the other one. But, I mean, what that involves is they're sites where you can go out with an older man, or one, usually man. You go out with an older man, and they'll pay you $200 just to go have dinner with them, because they say they want someone younger and more fun and lively and pretty, or go to this event with me because I need someone on my arm. But they do it. You know, you talk about people in college. College kids are trying to survive and live financially, and student loans and all that stuff. They go, I can make $200 for going to eat with some old dude. I'm in, right? Where can I sign up for this? I think that those are, you've got to find a way. Again, I go back to being honest and straight up. You've got to find a way to be honest. I mean, like, there's a detective over in the cities in Minneapolis that he talks about this, and he's done a lot of looking into this. He goes, in every case, with every person that he's ever worked with that did sugar daddy or the, sugaring or seeking arrangements, in every case, they were asked to have sex. In some cases, they were pushed to be raped. And again, I don't care what kids think, if they want $200 or not. It doesn't matter. You've got to get to the reality of what this is. And I think if you haven't started having those conversations with your kids when they're younger, I don't know how you're going to continue to have that conversation when they're older and reaching the age where they're doing that. You've got to build your credibility throughout their life that you love them and that you're after their best interests. And I think that's how you talk to them. But what would I say? I probably can't say it on this live video, but I would lay out what it really is, and I would say, this is what you're going to find if you go on one of these things. Watch for this, and this. That's what I would say. And I would, again, I probably couldn't say it on this video, but I would be very direct, very authentic, and very real about what it is, because they don't know it. The other thing kids need, they do need some proof sometimes. If you're a parent, they're talking about that, Google it, for God's sake. Go out and find stories of how this has turned out for other people and show them to your kids. Let them say, look, here's what happened to this person. Here's what happened to this person. That's why Pornhub's gotten hit so hard, is because, thank God, some people, Exodus Christ stepped up and went after them, but they had a video of a 15-year-old being raped on there that they were making money on, and no one was saying anything. You could show these kind of examples that will allow kids to all of a sudden go, Mom's not just a moron or trying to keep me from having fun. This really did happen. This is really a thing. So I think they need some evidence too.
No, man, that's so good. That's so good. It's listening. I see so many people saying, listening, absorbing, connecting. I mean, so much of what we've talked about is about, it really goes back to love and belonging. And I've seen some, I don't have kids yet either, but I've seen some of my friends with kids do so well at connecting with their kiddos to talk about hard things and to make a safe place in your relationship to where you can discuss hard things. And my mom did really well with us on that growing up, and I'm grateful to this day. She would ask me some of the most awkward questions. I still remember to this day, sitting in the back seat when she's like, do you blah, blah, and I'm like, Mom, I do not want to talk about this, but she created safety for me. And that was so healthy, growing up, having a mom that I felt comfortable to talk to, when I did stupid stuff. And so, that's so good. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. So what would you, last remarks, people don't know that this is happening in regards to hearing your piece of the story, and that this is everyday people living in everyday USA, small towns, big towns. There is a desire for connection that may turn into a porn addiction, that may turn into buying sex, and it's real. And so, what would you say, people, I guess, just last remarks, anything you have left?
I think that people are genuinely designed and built to live freely, to live in freedom. I think they're designed for it. I think that shame, condemnation, guilt, the voices of their past, their dad, their coach, whatever it is, will hold them down and keep them from being able to be brave enough to take risks and brave enough to take a chance. I think there's a lot of people that want to be brave. There's a lot of people that want to risk. And when I talk about risking taking chances, I'm not talking about skydiving out of a parachute. I'm talking about risking from the heart and going, this is really happening. This is a thing. I am so mad at you right now. I don't know what to do with myself. And I looked at porn last night because I was pissed off and because you're not sleeping with me. And I don't know why you're not, because you should be, because I'm a husband and blah, blah, blah. And again, I'm not saying that stuff is right, but I'm saying you've got to get to the point where you can have a conversation with people. When it comes to relationships and personal relationships, when it comes to relationships, we're talking about trafficking. It's very, at the end of the day, everybody needs to be loved where they are, as they are, and not for whatever expectation that we have for them. We've got to figure out how to love people where they are. If you are a person that thinks that this doesn't happen in your town, you need to get yourself educated. You do need to learn what force, fraud, and coercion looks like. It does look like a date for some old person. It does look like sometimes the massage parlors in Dallas, not legitimate massage, the massage parlors in Dallas. It looks like the strip clubs because the pimps send them there to make X number of dollars every night at a strip club. It looks, I mean, there's a lot of things that it looks like, but if your definition is it's kidnapping into selling someone to a sheik in Saudi Arabia, you're going to miss it and it's right in front of your face. Yeah. And that's why I say what I do, because we've got to stop pretending like this doesn't exist. It's never going to change if we act like it's under the rug. It's here. It's now. It is a major multi-billion-dollar industry in America. And it's time that we wake up and talk about it. Look at the changes that have happened just in the last 6 months from someone talking about Pornhub, talking about it, putting something out. They've lost sponsorships, Visa and MasterCard's pulling out. They pulled down 10 million videos off of their website. Something happened, not because someone went into their offices and shot them, but because they went online and they made sure that they spread valuable information about how human trafficking and the abuse of human people were done on their website, and they didn't care. And if we are going to act like that happens through Pornhub, and we act like it doesn't happen in Garland and Plano and every little small town in the world, then you're the same thing. You're acting like it doesn't happen, and you're pretending like it's not there. It is. And it's time for us to do something about it. For the men that are on this call, I need you to step up, and I need you to get real and stop trying to be and pretend that you're something you're not. Be authentic with people, but you don't have to be a wuss to be authentic. You can be authentic and be as strong as nails, because you've got to find a way. If you want to see a change for your families, for your daughters, and for your family, we've got to figure out how to talk about this stuff now. Not later, not next generation, let them deal with it. We got to talk about it now.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. Well, we're going to continue this discussion this month, and we may end up having you back because there's just so much that we didn't even get to. But
Love that.
I think that if you're riled up, if you are like, oh my gosh, I've got to do something. This is a lot. You know, I want to do something. I want to tell you to slow down and learn, because I think a lot of people can do more harm than good, based off emotion. When you are fired up and want to go conquer the world and free the world, you can hurt people in the meantime. And so this is a complex issue. We barely brushed the surface even on the demand side today or tonight. And so learn, go read books. We've got amazing book recommendations. There's a lot out there as far as what to learn. But, you know, I think as an example, back in May, when a lot of the Black Lives Matter stuff started and I want to learn more from my Black sisters, you know what I mostly learned? I learned that I've got to go do some learning. I've got to go read some books. I've got to go understand the issue before I can be the change necessarily. I think part of being the change is learning. And so read the research, read the books, talk to people, and just do your due diligence. Wherever you are, find the local nonprofit organizations that fight trafficking in your city and go learn from them. And before you go step out and try to act, I just want to really encourage you to do that. So thank you, John, so much for sharing your story. Again, like I said, we've all got pieces of our shadow, but not all of us are willing to go out on the World Wide Web and share about it. And so thanks for being brave. And yeah, it means a lot. It means a whole lot. So thank you, guys. And we might post this hopefully on our Facebook or later on our Instagram. So feel free to keep putting comments there, and we can try to answer some of your questions later. But you guys have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye. See you.